SLS judging is surprisingly consistent if you look at half-cab nose slide to tail slides. In the SLS best tricks section, half-cab back nose to tail slides have a success rate of just under 43%, out of 28 total attempts from 3 unique skaters, and the average score for the 12 makes is 8.85. Chaz Ortiz was the first skater to land this trick back in 2010, which is the year SLS started. Ortiz earned himself a 6.7 for the effort, which remains the lowest score ever for that trick in an SLS best tricks section. Chris Cole was the second skater to land the trick at the 2013 Kansas City stop, where he was awarded an 8.8. From that point to today, Kelvin Hoefler is the only other skater to land that trick, and he's done it 10 times, once with a big spin out. Hoefler landed a half cab nose to back tail on 3 separate occasions in 2017, first at the Barcelona Pro Open in May, where he scored an 8.2. A month later, Kelvin landed the trick again and executed it with more perfection than the last time, correspondingly scoring a half point higher for an 8.7. The last 2017 appearance of that trick was at the Super Crown final in LA, where Kelvin added a big spin out of the half cab nose to tail slide, in turn getting the highest score yet for that trick via a 9.0. This was a potentially controversial situation because while Kelvin flawlessly performed the slide portion of the half cab nose to tail, the big spin out featured some glaringly obvious toe drag and an extremely slow rollaway as a result, not to mention a slight tic-tac as well. In that particular Super Crown, Kelvin's toe touch 9 club trick bumped out Louis from 3rd place, who had previously landed a flawless half cab 50-50 down the main big rail, and a unique kickflip Manny crook combo. Louis' Manny trick appeared to show him touching down all 4 wheels before popping into the crook, arguably requiring a penalty to his score for the error, which is what seems to have happened when the judges gave him an 8.5. Given the context of both Louis and Kelvin's previous tricks, and the clutch nature of Hoefler landing the half-cab nose to back tail big spin on his final attempt, the judges put the better performing skaters in the right positions even with the imperfections. Hell, Nyjah, who ended up annihilating the field at the 2017 Super Crown, heel touched on the back 3 kickflip lip slide on the main down rail, and still scored a 9.5, which was the highest single score of the entire event, while Shane's absolutely perfect switch tray double huck down the main set scored lower at 9.4. Factors like clutch makes late in a contest and relative difficulty compared to the rest of the field justify why Nyjah's heel touch on the back 3 kicky lip and Kelvin's toe touch on the half cab nose to back tail big spin still score high, because in Nyjah's case, the amount of body spinning, board flipping, and then going the extra mile by sliding down the biggest rail on the course is the hardest and scariest trick compared to anyone else on that given day. And even though Shane landed his huck perfectly, he didn't need to deal with the added risk of sliding down a rail, hence the 1/10 of a point differential. And in Kelvin's case, his 9.0 is also a relatively lower score than Nyjah's because he did his trick on a flat ledge and didn't flip his board, while Louis understandably got left behind because he didn't deliver late in the best trick section. If you watched the 2023 SLS Chicago contest, you might have noticed some statistics related to skater average historical scores and consistency rates were featured. It turns out there's actually someone who enjoys punishing themselves in the form of logging skateboarding tricks just as much, if not more so than myself, as evidenced by the work of the homie Nick Mancini from SkateSense.com. Not only has he logged every trick performed by a skater in SLS and their corresponding score since 2010, but the man behind SkateSense.com has also grinded through other events like Dew Tour, Tampa Pro, X Games, and World Skate events. You love to see skate nerds getting their shine, like Skate Sense being featured in SLS broadcasts. Kelvin pulled off 3 more half-cab nose to tail slides in 2019, first in the prelims of the London stop in May, then again in the finals at the same stop, both times scoring a 9.0. Hoefler's 3rd demonstration of the trick in 2019 was in the prelims at the SLS LA stop in July, where he did the trick similarly perfect compared to the London stop and also on the first best trick attempt like in London, but at LA he didn't choose the biggest, scariest hubba/rail, instead opting for the relatively lower, mellower, long hubba, and was only able to score an 8.4. Unsurprisingly, Nyjah would have the highest score in that prelim, getting a 9.3 on the gap to big spin back lip off one of the kickers onto the weirdly shaped square rail immediately after Kelvin Kelvin's half-cab nose to back tail. I say unsurprisingly because Nyjah gapping off a kicker and gapping to a higher rail creates more risk than Kelvin going from flat and not needing to gap to get onto the relatively lower, mellower hubba. And while Kelvin is technically rotating his body more than Nyjah needed to do on the back lip, Houston spun his board awkwardly into the back lip during the gap, further rationalizing his higher score of nearly 1 full point. Kelvin is a smart competitor and adjusted his third best trick attempt by applying a cab back tail to the bigger center gap to rail, scoring an 8.7. Yuto would be the only skater in that heat clutch enough to land a difficult trick on one of the scariest obstacles of the course, securing himself a finals berth via landing a nollie 270 back tail for an 8.9. 5 other 9 clubs from that prelim came from Aurelian's impressive hard flip gap off the kicker across the long mellow hubba for a 9.1, Jagger Eaton's backside flip nose grind on the long mellow hubba for a 9.2, Gustavo Ribeiro's tray flip nose grind down the gap to big center rail / hubba for a 9.1, Angelo Caro's bigger flip front board on the kicker gap to rail for a 9.0, and Matt Berger's chaotic kick flip back tail big spin on the lower long mellow hubba for a 9.1.
Big spins, it slides, he almost falls again. Pulled it off. That's worth more points in my book that he pulled that off.
Kelvin's half-cab nose slide to back tail would not return until 2022, where Hoefler and his wild fit, the black Cariuma tee over a black long-sleeve polo with brown pants and new era monster hat with the sticker still on it combination, managed to roll away from the trick down the main long hubba, but not before getting handsy with the ground, and as a result, he earned his lowest point total for that trick with a 7.5. 1 month later, Kelvin perfectly landed the half-cab nose to tail in the finals of the Vegas stop on his third best trick attempt, impressively navigating the main hubba's kink during the switch from nose slide to tail slide, but only scored an 8.7, which was only good enough to be the 7th highest scoring trick of the final. And without being able to land another trick after, Hoefler ended up 4th overall. Braden Hoban, who placed 3rd, scored an 8.8 as his highest score in the best trick section with a kickflip gap to nose grind down the big hubba, which scored the same as the eventual champion Gustavo Ribeiro's crook across and down the hubba to nollie flip out. 1 turn later, Gustavo nollie varial heeled out of the same crook and got a much higher 9.2. Which was the same score he got 2 tries earlier when he did a bigger flip front board. Joslin was the clutchest skater at Vegas, landing his 2 highest scoring tricks in the super final. First with an 8.9 on a perfect big flip huck down the center stair set, and 1 turn later getting the day's highest score overall with a similarly perfect bigger flip for a 9.4, placing 2nd behind Ribeiro. Hoefler's last 2 half-cab nose-to-tails took place in the 2023 Chicago stop. First in the third best trick attempt of the prelims, where he scored an 8.9 for a perfect execution down the big center hubba, and identically perfect later first attempt of the best trick section in the finals. But perhaps because he did it earlier relative to the prelims as well as potentially getting docked for repetition, the effort was only good enough for an 8.8. It wouldn't matter though, because Kelvin was the only skater able to answer DeCenzo's front shove back nose grind in the final attempt of the best trick section, landing a perfect cab back tail for a 9.0, and winning his first SLS stop since 2015. The half cab nose to back tail's highest scores were in 2019, where it scored a 9.0, and ever since then, the trick has not cracked 9, but has remained right below at about 8.8 to 8.9, and given the context of each circumstance, the judging appears to remain fairly solid, avoiding drastic fluctuation in scoring a trick.